Your knowledge of the display list can be used to access any object in Flash from virtually any location. One example of that is the parent property, which allows you to communicate backwards from one object to its parent display object container. On the stage here I have border_MC, which is an animation. If I double click on that movie clip, you can see the animation. Inside of that movie clip on frame 1, I have an instance called border solo. If I double click on that instance, I'll enter a movie clip called border solo. You'll see that I have the basic bitmap shape of the border and then the skateboard inside of a movie clip with an instance name of board. So let's say I want to communicate to the skateboard. In order to do that, I'll need to communicate to the border itself, which is inside of the border_MC movie clip. Let's go to the first keyframe of the actions layer and open up the actions panel. In here, under the line of code where I created the variable, I'll type border.border solo.alpha equals 0.25. So to access the solo border, I can simply use .syntax. So border, which is the outside border or border_MC, border solo is the border itself, not the animation. And then I can tweak that by modifying its properties with .syntax. So let's test the movie. Now we see the border's alpha is 0.25, but watch when I click the border, the alpha goes up. Take a second to think about why that is. Are we modifying the border's alpha, or are we modifying the solo border's alpha? Look at the code. Border, which is border_MC, or the animation, .border solo.alpha. So we're only modifying that first frame. So we're only modifying the instance on that first frame of border_MC. Now take a second to think about how you would access the skateboard if you only wanted to modify the skateboard. Just like accessing the solo border, you can access the skateboard through .syntax. So after border solo, type .board and you can modify its properties. So let's see what happens when we set the X position of the board to 0. Now I'll test the movie and it appears that the code is not working because the board doesn't seem to be moved. However, the board's position is at 0 relative to its parent movie clip. So if I wanted to move it backwards, I would have to give it a negative value. So I could then type -25, test the movie, and the board is shifted 25 pixels to the left. So using .syntax, you can modify child and grandchild elements. But what if you want to modify a parent element? Let's look at how to do that. At the bottom of my code, I created a simple function called restart. This would represent restarting the game. All it does is it puts the border on the first frame and then sets his X position to 0. Let's say we wanted to run this function from inside of the border. Let's take a look at why you might want to do that. Close the Actions panel and double-click the border on the stage to enter its timeline. So let's say you click on the border and he plays his closing animation where he falls down. Once the animation is complete, you'll want to send the border back to his original state by running that restart function on the main timeline. So here's an instance where you want some code to trigger after an animation has played, so it makes sense to put code inside of the timeline of a movie clip. I'll select the last keyframe of the Actions layer and open up the Actions panel. Make sure you're inside of that border movie clip. So the first frame says stop. Now to communicate to an object's parent, all you need to do is use the parent command. So type parent.restart. Now by itself, this code may not work. So if I test the movie, I get an error. And Flash tells me call to a possibly undefined method restart. Let me explain why this is happening. Flash knows who the parent of this object is. It's the main timeline. Flash also knows that there's a restart function on the main timeline. Here's the problem. The data type for this parent property is not a movie clip, it is a display object. And a display object does not have a function called restart built into it. So what I need to do is tell Flash to treat this as a different type of object. So before parent, I'll type object with a capital O and wrap parent in parentheses. Object is basically a generic object that can have any properties and methods. So this is the easiest way to do this. Type object, capital O, wrap parent in parentheses, and after the close parenthesis, type .restart, test the movie. You don't get any errors. If you click the border, it'll fall off, then return to the left edge of the stage on frame 1. So this technique where we wrapped parent inside of object and told Flash to treat it as a different type of data is called typecasting. So using the parent property with the typecasting technique, you can access any object from within any timeline of your application.